As we always do, we'll start things off with the latest NFL headlines. As you saw in the description on my show, Kurt Warner considering a comeback, or at least he was, for the 2018 season. We have the soundbite to play for you guys later in the show. Then I got my top 5 teams for Kurt Warner that could perhaps sign him at some point this offseason. We're going to have some fun. So everybody put on their humor hats, if you will, and have a little fun with me later in the show. All right, then, top 5 LeBron James playoff performances. I'll count you down from number 5 all the way down to number 1. And then at the end of the show, a look ahead to the Players' Championship. Tiger Woods will tee it up at TPC Sawgrass in Ponte Vedra Beach. And it should be a fun tournament at that. Tiger and Phil playing together. We'll get to those marquee groupings later in the show. With that, let's get to the latest NFL headlines here on this Wednesday morning. And we start things off with Johnny Manziel being hospitalized recently in Humble, Texas. This was actually on Monday. He had been in the area to attend the JMBLYA concert with friends after playing golf with Mike Evans, former teammate at Texas A&M, of course. And Manziel's rep, Denise Michaels, said, quote, "It seems like he had a reaction to an adjustment in his prescription. He's fine and he's headed home." So Manziel also released a statement, quote, "Unfortunately, I had a reaction to an increased dosage in lithium, which I take for my bipolar disorder." This was what I was thinking. I think maybe he just had some sort of reaction to the prescriptions that he had because, of course, he went on GMA recently and said that he does suffer from bipolar disorder. So it's, you know, nothing out of the ordinary per se, just perhaps maybe a bad dosage or whatever the case may be. And he's actually impressing scouts of late. Manziel played in a couple spring league games. He rushed for a couple touchdowns in his second game, so showed some pretty good flashes in the repetitions that he had in that league. And apparently I said the concert wrong, by the way. I'm not really up with it with the pop culture here in Texas, so apologies for all the Texas residents. Apparently it's not the JMBLYA concert, but be sure to correct me in the comments section. People are already doing it here at Chat Sports. Let's get to the next headline here. The Panthers and C.J. Anderson are now a pair. How about this? So I like this deal. It's a one-year deal, terms not initially disclosed by the Panthers here. Anderson played pretty well last year, guys, having his first 1,000-yard campaign in his career, and that happened with just an okay offensive line, especially in the interior. It wasn't really good in run blocking for the Denver Broncos. And oh, by the way, zero threat at the quarterback position when you have the likes of Paxton Lynch and Trevor Siemian tossing the pigskin around. It's kind of easy to stack the box and try to stop C.J. Anderson. So I think he's going to be a great complement to Christian McCaffrey there, who had a solid rookie season in his own right. 80 receptions, 651 yards. A bit of a slow start for him in that Carolina offense, but they have a really good ground game. They rushed, ranking 4th last year, averaging a healthy 131 yards per game, and of course Cam Newton was a big portion of that. CJ, a Pro Bowler back in 2014. Something tells me that new offensive coordinator Norv Turner doesn't want to run Cam Newton as much as the Panthers did last year. Newton led the Panthers with a career-high 754 yards on the ground. And although that's great production from your franchise quarterback, that's not something I want to see as an OC, right? I want to keep my quarterback healthy and not running the football as much. Now, of course, you will have design plays with Cam Newton running the football and such, but that's why you bring in C.J. Anderson to kind of decrease the brunt of the load there with Cam Newton running the football. I personally have always been a C.J. Anderson fan. I think he'll bolster that Panthers ground attack even more. And the Panthers were a playoff team a year ago. People kind of forget that. They kind of snuck into the playoffs. Let me know, will the Panthers make the playoffs in 2018? Give me a heart for yes, a like for no, and be sure to expand upon yourselves here on Facebook Live as well as YouTube on demand. All right, let's get to the next headline here on the Cam Rogers Show. And, well, Mark Ingram has been suspended for 4 games for PED use. Not good news there for old Mark. So guess whose fantasy draft stock just shot up? Alvin Kamara. So the NFL officially suspending Ingram for those first 4 games. And Ingram last year led the Saints with 230 carries for 1,100 yards roughly and 12 touchdowns. He added 58 catches for 416 yards as well. So the good news is Ingram can participate in off-season workouts and OTAs and training camp as well as preseason games. He, of course, just can't be in those first 4 regular season games for the New Orleans Saints. So if you fantasy football players out there are getting your research done early, tell you what, Alvin Kamara is an easy top 5 running back, suspension or not, with Mark Ingram here, but certainly going to have a higher stock and more hype with this suspension now. He's going to get a lot more work in those first 4 games for the New Orleans Saints, and Drew Brees not getting any younger either. So the Kamara train is choo-chooing down the tracks. Let's get to the next headline here, and it ain't a good one for Reuben Foster because this legal case continues to go on and it's getting muddier and muddier, but this is what we do know. Foster pleading not guilty to the 3 felony charges that are before him, including domestic violence stemming from an incident with his ex-girlfriend on February 11th. The preliminary trial is set for May 17th, but there's also a hearing this Friday which relates to a subpoena for evidence. He doesn't have to go to that. In fact, it's possible this hearing doesn't even happen on Friday. We'll see about that. The charges were officially filed on April 12th, you guys may recall, and the DA's office alleges that Foster dragged his ex-girlfriend by her hair, punched her in the head 8 to 10 times, and physically removed her from the house. Now, the alleged victim here recently recanted domestic violence allegations against Foster, which makes this whole case really muddy and difficult to kind of predict here. So the alleged victim provided a video of an altercation with another woman, which the victim says her basically injuries came from that altercation in that video with that woman there. So Foster, of course, has not been attending 49ers team activities, and John Lynch has been vocal about this ongoing situation here, saying that if Foster is indeed convicted of these charges, the 49ers will release him. Foster could face up to 11 years in prison if he is fully convicted. So the 49ers right now trying to work on this insurance policy should Foster miss some time or a lot of time. And, of course, they went out and got Fred Warner, the linebacker out of BYU. Not the perfect Reuben Foster replacement. He's a bit speedier, a bit smaller than Reuben, but I think he'll be a fine player on that weak side. Of course, you got Malcolm Smith as well, who's coming back from injury, and Eli Harold is there in the linebacking core, Brock Coyle, but it would certainly make 49ers fans feel a lot better if Reuben Foster were to be found not guilty. Let me know what you think, though, guys, because here on the Cam Rogers Show, we don't encourage your participation. We demand it, so hit me up on Facebook Live. We see Dan chiming in. Foster better get a 6-game suspension. I'll tell you this much, Dan. I think that is the baseline. Even if Foster is found not guilty, he's going to get the 6 games because that is the classic suspension amount for domestic violence cases, and that's what probably Roger Goodell is going to do. The burden of proof in the legal system among the courts is a lot different than within the NFL, right? Just look at the Ezekiel Elliott situation and how that all dragged on, which we could see something like that again with the 49ers and Reuben Foster, but we'll see. James chiming in. What up, James? Bring back Bowman. How about this, James? Theory for you. 49ers are now considering Navarro Bowman because the Raiders have Derek Johnson now. They're not going to bring back Bowman, so maybe the 49ers go out and sign him, get a veteran player back on that defense. He knows the system pretty well, and maybe he can be that stopgap option until Reuben Foster eventually comes back. Not a bad theory, am I right, James? All right, let's get to the next headline here. Tony Romo praising Jason Witten, who's now in the broadcast booth. Well, actually, both of them are now. So Romo wrote an emotional letter earlier this week in regards to Witten's retirement, saying, quote, "Not only was Jason the most talented, humble, and hardest-working individual on the football team, but he was also one of the most genuine, good-hearted people you could ever meet." So there you go. Tony Romo with some big-time praise for one Jason Witten there. The two spent 13 seasons together. Witten was constantly Tony Romo's security blanket there for so many years. And Now they're both headed to the broadcast booth, or one has been there. Tony Romo, of course, the lead analyst on CBS alongside Jim Nantz, and Jason Witten going to be a lead analyst for Monday Night Football with Joe Tessitore there, and that'll be a fun pairing at that. Of course, you got Booger McFarland as well as the field analyst, so a lot of fun new pieces there to the broadcast for Monday Night Football. But Tony Romo, I mean, you talk about a guy who has gone through so much and so much turnover, more specifically, and going out and saying that Jason Witten was the best player he could have ever met. It was pretty good stuff there. So I loved watching those two play. I'm not even a Dallas Cowboys fan, and I loved watching those two play just from a general NFL standpoint. So good stuff there from Tony. Wish Jason all the best, of course, when he heads to the broadcast booth there at ESPN. All right, so one man is retiring. Is another coming back? All right, folks, so here is the deal. Kurt Warner legit considered a comeback for the 2018 season. And ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that I love are nostalgic moments, nostalgic stories, comeback stories. You know, the Brett Favres of the world. Boy Meets World came back and became Girl Meets World. Fuller House, right? The revamp of the original Full House. Now we're still waiting on Saved by the Bell. But here you go. Kurt Warner legit considered coming back to the NFL. We have the sound bites to play for you guys. He was recently on an ESPN baseball broadcast talking about it. Let's roll it.
Well, I tell you what, I was actually ready for this coming season. I actually talked to a coach, and my wife said, go for it. I think it would be great. So I actually talked to a coach about possibly doing it if they needed someone, but then they went out and signed somebody. I don't think they thought I was serious, and so I think we're completely done now.
So he was talking to a coach. Wow, we almost had Kurt Warner back in the NFL. So Kurt's going to turn 47 in June, guys. Hasn't played since the 2009 campaign. He has also said that he wants an opportunity just in 7-on-7s, just to see what he can do. Almost wants to test himself a little bit here. Now, there are a few ways to parse this, and let me just first say, this is extremely unlikely for Kurt Warner to come back into the NFL. I mean, you're talking about a Hall of Fame quarterback, and what Hall of Fame NFLer would say that they don't have what it takes to, you know, maybe try out and see what they can do in the NFL again? You know, I bet you if you asked Jerry Rice, he would say the same thing. Sure, I think I could give it a shot in 7-on-7s. I think maybe it's kind of how they're wired, right? I mean, these are guys that are ultra successful players formerly in the NFL, and for them to just say, well, I don't have it anymore, that's not in their DNA. Their DNA is to be good and to realize that they're good and to really never lose that. So Kurt Warner took it in a new direction. There's no doubt about that. Actually talking to an NFL coach about this. Who that coach was, we don't know. My theory is it was John Gruden, because it's John Gruden. He's brought in a couple of veterans so far with the Oakland Raiders there. So that's my theory on the matter. Now, we're going to have some fun later in the show. I'm going to give you guys my top 5 teams that could sign Kurt Warner this off season, because I'm looking at this quote here that he still wants an opportunity in 7-on-7s. That tells me he still wants an opportunity to get some reps in training camp and OTAs and whatever to see what he can do. And if there are some injuries throughout the off season and throughout camp and all this stuff, maybe a team comes calling. So just hear me out. I know he's going to turn 47, but we'll talk about the top 5 teams later in the show. Let's get to the next headline here. The New England Patriots and Rob Gronkowski will be tweaking Rob's contract here. So this according to the Boston Herald, which is reporting the Patriots plan to make some changes to the Gronk deal. He's 28, currently has 2 years left on his contract with $17 million in base salary. Now, he could make up to $9 million this year based on his current deal. So the thought process is Gronk may get more guaranteed money while the Patriots spread a bonus over multiple years on their salary cap. So it's kind of a win-win situation there. Last year, Gronk recorded 69 receptions, 1,084 yards, and 8 touchdowns to earn his 4th first-team All-Pro selection. The guy's still playing at a high level. Now, there was the whole ordeal with maybe Gronk retiring, maybe him not retiring, and it went on and on and on. And you guys have heard me rant about this before, that Gronk probably wasn't in the good graces with Bill Belichick there, and maybe Belichick was considering trading Gronk. Obviously, that didn't happen, and Gronk is going to play in 2018 and perhaps beyond that as the Patriots and Rob go through these adjustments here with his contract. So one successful tight end. This one wasn't so. Cut Fleener has been cut by the New Orleans Saints. So after Fleener signed that 5-year deal prior to the 2016 season, he's no longer there. So Fleener carries an $8.2 million dead cap hit, which is pretty high considering his $8 million cap number for this season. It's fair to say Fleener simply didn't pan out with the Saints. He was supposed to be a stud on that team. I know he was a popular name among fantasy football circles as well. When he joined the Saints, everybody was like, oh my God, sleeper alert, Cut Fleener, tight end for the Saints, look out. But he just totaled 926 yards and 5 touchdowns across the last 2 seasons. So not exactly good return on investment there. According to Pro Football Reference, Fleener only played 25.94% of offensive snaps for the Saints last year. They paid this guy 5 years worth of money, and they didn't use him last year, so maybe he was in the doghouse or whatever. I don't know, but yikes, Cut Fleener now on the open market looking for a new team, and I'm thinking it's going to take some time for him to find a new destination. Tight end position is very shallow in the NFL. All right, let's get to some Carson Wentz news. He's pretty confident that he'll be good to go in Week 1 of the 2018 season. He was recently on Good Morning Football saying the rehab process has been great so far. His goal is to be ready for Week 1. Rappaport recently tweeted and shed some light on the progress, noting that Wentz's mechanics are sound and basically throwing the same or even better than before the injury. Now, this could all just be, hearsay, who knows. But I think that's huge considering ACL injuries can really mess up your delivery. As a former quarterback, I can tell you, you get into a rhythm with your delivery. You plant your foot. Of course, you have the slot when you throw the football, and you have this motion that you're used to. If you get an ACL injury, which I never did back in my playing days, that can certainly mess things up, mess up your plant foot, and then that just reacts upward, right, where you can mess up your arm throwing motion and all this stuff. So it's good news for Carson Wentz. Now, with that said, the Eagles can't mess this up. I mean, there is no reason to mess this up because you have a Super Bowl winning quarterback right behind him in Nick Foles. So if you are looking at Carson Wentz and it's the week before Week 1 and he's 99.99% ready to go, don't start him. That would just be moronic because you're giving yourself that 0.01% chance that something could go wrong. And I know nothing is guaranteed in life, not even the Purell hand sanitizer says 100% relief from germs. But still, I mean, if you can get to 100%, sign off from the doctor that Carson Wentz is good to go, then why not just wait for that, right? So I think if you have to, you play Nick Foles in Week 1 of 2018. Totally fine with that against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, the other thing to consider here is Carson Wentz is looking like he's not going to get any preseason reps, at least from what I'm gathering here. And if he doesn't get any preseason reps, it's going to take some time for him to kind of get accustomed to the regular season yet again. Joe Flacco, I always draw this comparison. Flacco is no Carson Wentz, I'll tell you that much. But Flacco missed the entire preseason a year ago, and he didn't look good, really, for the entire year, but especially in the beginning portion. So Wentz, of course, was in the MVP discussion for so long last year, threw for 3,296 yards, 33 touchdowns, just 7 picks in 13 games before getting injured there. Let me know what you think about the Eagles, because I have them in my number 1 slot for the post-draft power rankings, and that's more of respect for the champs because it's May, guys. There's no way I'm taking down the Eagles. They just won the Super Bowl. I'm going to keep them at number 1 unless things drastically change. If we hear word that Wentz isn't going to start for the first 3 games or something like that, then maybe I shift them back and put the Vikings or the Rams or maybe even the Patriots at number 1. All right, so again, Carson Wentz, confident he'll be good to go, but I'm thinking week 1 will be kind of a lofty goal, but we'll see. All right, let's go to another team in the NFC East, talking about the Giants here and Odell Beckham Jr. So a new logo has been released here, and I gotta say, guys, I'm not the biggest fan of this. So you may recall last May, he reportedly signed the largest shoe deal for any NFL player, giving him approximately $25 billion over 5 years. Let's take a look at that logo, and I think it's straight out of 17th century America lettering of some sort. Like, this is from a textbook from high school. What is that? OBJ. Like, I get it, but it's not all that nice looking. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it. I'm more of a fan of kind of like the player logo, like the Jeter logos and all that stuff, the Jordan logos. I'm not a big fan of the lettering here in this case. Why couldn't Odell have chosen like the net collapsing on him as his logo? I think that would have been kind of funny. Come on, have a sense of humor, Odell. So he also, 6 months later after that big-time deal with Nike, released that Special Field Air Force One mid-OBJ shoe. It's a good-looking shoe. It's okay. It's nothing special. It's no Jordan, nothing like that. But perhaps there's more to come here with Odell with this new logo. And I don't know. I think it looks like Mother Lori Rogers is watching the show right now, and she's in the marketing business. Maybe she can chime in on that logo there. All right, let's get to the next headline here. Let's talk about the NFLPA because it has filed a grievance case on behalf of safety Eric Reid. So Reid already has his own ongoing collusion case against the NFL, alleging that all 32 owners essentially are keeping him out of the NFL because he kneeled during the national anthem. He was one of the first to do so alongside Colin Kaepernick. Now, the new development is the NFLPA has filed a grievance and a system arbitrator case against the league on behalf of Reid. So the Players Association claims at least one team asked pre-employment interview questions that were inappropriate, particularly the questions about Reid's protesting during the national anthem, as you see with those pictures on your screen. The Cincinnati Bengals are at the center of all this because you may recall Eric Reid was brought in by Cincinnati, right? And they went through the interview process and reportedly demonstrating was asked of Eric Reid. What were his plans in terms of the national anthem and kneeling and all of this stuff? And apparently Reid didn't give a straightforward answer here. And so they didn't sign him. The Bengals didn't. And now you have the NFLPA right behind Eric Reid on the matter. So the NFLPA is essentially saying the following, right? Because, well, first of all, let me say this, and I've said this many times on my show. There is no legislation right now from the NFL that requires players to stand during the national anthem. All right? So what the NFLPA is essentially saying is the Bengals and perhaps other teams are preventing an act, kneeling during the national anthem, that isn't even disallowed by the league itself. Right? So the Cincinnati Bengals are preventing Reid from kneeling during the national anthem. The NFLPA does not like that. Again, this is me reporting the news to you guys. I'm not giving you my opinion on the matter. And the NFLPA is saying, well, Cincinnati, that should not be the reason you don't sign Eric Reid, because the NFL itself doesn't even have legislation that requires Eric Reid to stand. So that's the argument that's going on here. And you see the weigh-in on your screen, and I want you guys chiming in on this because this is a very fluid situation. I'm getting update after update after update on this. And just imagine yourselves, all right? You guys are the owner of an NFL team, and you're interviewing a player. Would you ask them about possible kneeling during the national anthem? Would that even be on your chart of questions? Like, all right, are you cool with playing box safety? All right, could you get your weight down 5 pounds? And oh, by the way, what are your plans for the national anthem? Like, is that part of your list of questions? Again, this is me asking you guys. I want you all chiming in here on the Cam Show because this is, again, a story that will continue to develop. And so we got cases from the NFLPA. We got a case from Colin Kaepernick who's saying collusion as well. We got Eric Reid with his own grievance case as well. So again, I've said this before on previous episodes, the safety market, very, very slow. Kenny Vaccaro, Trey Boston, Quentin Demps, all these guys still are without jobs, and they're all safeties. So maybe it has to do with the safety market in terms of Eric Reid, but Reid's a good player, so it's kind of surprising he's still without a job, and obviously Cincinnati looked into him. So we'll get your questions here on the broadcast, and we'll be sure to flash them here throughout the program. Let's get to one final headline here. Ryan Switzer says he was misused by the Dallas Cowboys. So Switzer spoke with 24/7 Sports, saying that the Cowboys kind of tried to force him into this Lance Dunbar 2.0 kind of role here. And look, the stats kind of support his argument. You look at this. Prior to Week 17, Switzer had 2 catches for 9 yards, compared to 4 rushes for 5 yards, including 1 for -4. All right, before the final week, Week 17, he had a combined 26 passing down snaps, according to Next Gen Stats there. They do great work. Never more than 5 in a single game. All right, so we're talking about a prolific slot receiver out of UNC who had 96 catches in his senior season. And for some reason, he was misused. And I think a lot of people tried to force the Cole Beasley narrative a little too much when Switzer was drafted by Dallas. And I understand that, and maybe, we probably should have cooled our jets on that note. But the way in which the Cowboys used him was just very, very questionable. And I understand that Zeke missed some games, and maybe Dallas had to get a little creative on their offense, which is kind of funny for me to say because Dallas is notoriously vanilla on offense. But Ryan Switzer, now a member of the Oakland Raiders there, and we'll see if he can kind of improve upon his senior season from UNC, because I'm thinking that Dallas Cowboys appearance last year, that season there, can just kind of be wiped away. All right, so there you go. That's the latest with Ryan Switzer.